I still remember the first time I saw him. Not the man he would become in my life, but just a shadow in the corner of a cold city street. It was the autumn of my 17th year, just before everything changed. The city was already wrapping itself in a chill, leaves crunching underfoot, and a restless wind that whispered secrets through the alleys. I was walking home from school, headphones in, mind elsewhere, lost in the usual teenage swirl of homework, friendships, and dreams of the future. Then, as I turned a corner, I noticed him sitting on the cracked pavement by the subway entrance. His clothes were tattered, stained by years of weather, and his eyes, though tired, held a kind of quiet warmth I hadn't expected. He was homeless, there was no doubt about it. Yet, despite everything, something about him didn't feel like fear or menace or desperation. It felt honest. I had grown up in a middle-class household, the kind of place where stability was a given, and worries were mostly about grades or the occasional fight with my younger brother. Homelessness was something you saw on TV, a far-off tragedy that belonged to other people's lives, not mine. Yet here he was, real, tangible, sitting just a few feet away from where I stood. His name was Sam, and that's what he told me the first time I dared to speak to him. I had been hesitant, unsure how to approach someone so different from everyone I knew. But Sam smiled gently and said, "Hey kid, you're safe here." Those words, simple as they were, planted a seed that would grow into a story I never could have imagined. My world was a bubble that day. I lived in a neighborhood where everyone knew their place, where dreams were measured by college acceptance letters and summer camps. Sam didn't fit into any of that. He was a man who had fallen through the cracks of life, but somehow he still cared. About the world, about kindness, and later, about me. Over the next few weeks, I found myself drawn back to the same spot. I brought him sandwiches, blankets, and sometimes just sat beside him, sharing stories about school, family, and the silly dramas that filled my life. He listened without judgment. His presence was steady, grounding. At home, I kept this secret from my parents. They wouldn't understand. Not yet. They saw the city streets through a lens of caution and avoidance. But I wanted to know more. I wanted to understand how someone could lose everything yet still hold on to love. It was around this time I turned 18, an age that should have felt like freedom but instead came with heavy questions. Who was I? What did I believe in? And how could a man like Sam teach me about strength when my life felt so uncertain? The city moved around us, busy, loud, indifferent. But in the small bubble where I sat with Sam, time slowed. He spoke of his past in fragments, a lost job, a broken family, mistakes made, and opportunities missed. But more than that, he spoke of hope, of second chances, of the love that never fades even when everything else does. It wasn't the kind of love I had read about in books or seen on screen. It was raw, real, and without expectation. It challenged everything I thought I knew about love and family. That autumn marked the beginning of my transformation, though I didn't realize it then. The seed planted on that cold street would grow, forcing me to face my own fears and prejudices, to question what mattered most in life. I was about to learn that love isn't about perfect circumstances or easy choices. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. And sometimes, the people who love us the most come from the places we least expect. As the leaves fell and the nights grew colder, I found myself stepping into a new world. One where the line between who I was and who I wanted to be blurred, shaped by a man who had nothing but gave me everything. The day everything changed didn't start with fireworks or loud announcements. It was quiet, ordinary in so many ways. Yet it marked the moment my life began to unravel and rebuild in ways I couldn't have imagined. I woke up that morning like any other, the usual mix of excitement and anxiety for the last year of high school weighing on me. But when I stepped outside, the air carried a different kind of tension. The city was buzzing with news of a new shelter opening just blocks from where Sam stayed. At first, I thought it would be good. Somewhere safer for him, a chance for a fresh start. But as the day wore on, it became clear this shelter was not just a place. It was a battleground. I found Sam near the park where we always met, his face clouded with worry. "They're shutting the place down," he told me quietly. "No one's welcome after dark. They say we're a problem." I could see the fear behind his eyes, but also something deeper, a stubborn refusal to give up, a determination to keep fighting even when the world seemed against him. This was the inciting incident that shattered the fragile balance we had built. The city's indifference turned into active rejection. Sam's life, already on the edge, grew even more precarious. I wanted to help, but I was just 18, still figuring out how to navigate my own challenges. My parents dismissed the situation as dangerous and told me to stay away. School counselors shrugged it off. No one seemed to care. Yet I couldn't turn away. That night, I went back to the park with a bag of supplies, blankets, food, a worn-out book I thought he might like. Sam looked at me with tired eyes but smiled, grateful beyond words. As the cold bit into our skin, he shared more of his story, how he had lost his job after a series of bad breaks, how addiction had clawed into his life, and how he had fought tooth and nail to pull back, how loneliness had been his constant companion. But through it all, he spoke of love. Not just the romantic kind, but the kind that keeps you alive. The love he felt for his sister, the love he held for people who showed him kindness, and most unexpectedly, the love he had found in me. His words hit me harder than I expected. I realized that his love was not just a comfort, it was a lifeline. And for the first time, I saw that the title of our story wasn't just a phrase, but a living truth. But this new reality came with dangers. That same week, a group of locals confronted Sam. Harsh words were exchanged. The police made visits that left him shaken. It was no longer just about survival. It was about fighting for dignity. I wanted to protect him, to shield him from the cold world that had rejected him, but I felt powerless. One night, as we sat beneath the dim glow of a street lamp, Sam took my hand. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. "I've been scared a lot longer than you. But love makes us brave." His words were both a comfort and a challenge. I had been afraid of judgment, afraid of losing him, afraid of stepping outside my safe bubble. But something inside me shifted that night. The central conflict of our story wasn't just about homelessness or hardship. It was about love pushing us to confront fear and change. From that moment on, I knew I couldn't pretend Sam didn't exist. I couldn't ignore the man who loved me like no one else, even when the world turned its back on him. This was the start of a battle, not just for Sam's place in the city, but for my own understanding of love, loss, and courage. The inciting incident had ignited a fire in both of us. The days ahead would test us in ways I hadn't imagined, forcing me to grow up faster than I wanted. But through every hardship, one thing remained clear. His love was a beacon, guiding me through the darkness. The days that followed the shelter's closure announcement felt heavier than any I had known before. The city's indifference was no longer subtle. It was a wall closing in on Sam and the people like him, pushing them further into the shadows. But amid the growing tension, our small bond became a fragile sanctuary. I spent as much time as I could with Sam, bringing him what little I could manage: warm clothes, food, books, and, more importantly, my presence. The world was quick to turn away, but I was learning to stay, to listen, and to hold space for someone who had been so deeply hurt. Yet the conflict wasn't just external. Inside me, a storm was brewing. I was still that girl on the cusp of adulthood, struggling with the pressures of school, family expectations, and my own doubts. Sam's situation forced me to confront parts of myself I hadn't seen before: fear, shame, but also strength I hadn't realized I possessed. I started to bring some of my friends closer to Sam's world, cautiously at first. There was Mia, my childhood friend, who surprised me by listening without judgment and even helping organize small donations. Then there was Mr. Garcia, my favorite teacher, who quietly encouraged me to use my voice, whether through writing or advocacy. Each person who stepped in became a thread weaving into the larger fabric of our story. The conflict deepened as we tried to build a support system in a city that seemed bent on pushing us aside. Sam wasn't just a lonely figure anymore. He was a symbol of a larger struggle, and I was learning what it meant to fight for someone else's dignity. Despite the growing challenges, there were moments of warmth and hope. One evening, Sam and I sat by the river, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. He told me stories of his childhood, the dreams he once had before life's storms battered him. There was sadness in his voice, but also a flicker of humor and resilience. I shared my own fears too. The uncertainty of adulthood, the fear of failing, the weight of expectations. For the first time, I realized how much we had in common despite our different worlds. Our conversations stretched into the night, weaving threads of trust and understanding. Sam wasn't just homeless. He was human, with hopes and fears as real as mine. The development phase was also about testing boundaries. I found myself pushing against my parents' disapproval, sneaking out late to meet Sam, hiding the reality of his life from my family to protect both him and myself. It was exhausting, but necessary. School became harder to manage. I was torn between two worlds, the safe bubble of my education and the harsh reality of the streets. The conflict was no longer abstract. It was my daily life. One afternoon, Sam invited me to visit a community center where he sometimes volunteered. It was a small, rundown building filled with people who had stories similar to his. There, I met others struggling to rebuild their lives, people with dreams buried under layers of hardship. Their stories touched me deeply. I began to write about what I saw and felt, channeling my emotions into words. My essays and poems started to reflect a new perspective, one shaped by love, loss, and the fierce determination to change. But not everything was hopeful. The city's coldness sometimes felt unbearable. Sam faced harassment, and there were nights when he disappeared, swallowed by the streets. I learned that love was not enough to fix everything, but it was the spark that kept us moving forward. The attempts at resolution in this act were small but meaningful. I helped Sam apply for a job at a local shelter, knowing the odds were slim but hoping for a foothold. I organized a small fundraiser with Mia and a few classmates, collecting blankets and food. Each step was a battle against despair, but also a testament to our growing resolve. At home, cracks appeared in my family relationships. My parents' fear turned into frustration. They couldn't understand why I was risking so much for someone like Sam. Arguments grew louder, and the weight of their disapproval pressed down on me. Yet, with every conflict, I grew stronger. I realized that love was not just about comfort, but also about standing firm when everything else seemed to crumble. Sam's love, constant and unwavering, became my anchor. He believed in me even when I doubted myself. By the end of this act, I was no longer just the girl who brought sandwiches to a homeless man. I was becoming a young woman willing to fight for justice, love, and change. The journey was far from over, but the path was clear. The development phase had deepened our connection and set the stage for the trials ahead, tests that would push us to our limits and force us to confront the true meaning of love. The chill of winter settled over the city, but inside me, the storm was growing fierce. What had started as a quiet rebellion against the world's indifference had become a battle on multiple fronts, one that tested every ounce of my courage and heart. Sam's situation worsened. The shelter was closed for good, and the few places that remained were overcrowded, cold, and unwelcoming. The city seemed determined to erase him, to push him into invisibility. I watched helplessly as the man who loved me like no one else grew thinner, colder, and more tired. One night, the worst happened. Sam disappeared. I searched frantically for days, tracing every corner of the city we had known together. The fear clawed at my chest, a raw, unbearable ache that I hadn't expected to feel so deeply. It was during those dark days that I faced my greatest test. Could I hold on to hope when everything screamed despair? Could I fight for someone who was slipping through my fingers? The obstacles multiplied. My parents' anger turned to cold silence, and the once warm home I had known felt like a cage. Friends drifted away, uncomfortable with the chaos that had entered my life. School suffered, my grades slipping as my mind was consumed with worry. I felt torn apart. The conflict inside me was as fierce as the one outside. My convictions were tested daily. Could love really survive in a world so unforgiving? I began to question everything. Was I naive? Was my love enough? In those moments of doubt, I remembered Sam's words, "Love makes us brave." But bravery didn't mean absence of fear. It meant facing fear head-on, even when it threatened to break you. A breakthrough came when a local outreach worker named Clara stepped into my life. She was fierce and kind, a woman who had walked through hardship herself and come out stronger. Clara helped me understand the systems and barriers that trapped people like Sam, and she encouraged me to channel my pain into action. With Clara's help, I started volunteering at a community center. I met others who had stories as complicated as Sam's, each one filled with pain but also with resilience. The shared struggle built a sense of solidarity that I hadn't expected. But the emotional toll was high. One evening, after a long day of volunteering, I broke down in tears. The weight of it all, the cold streets, the cruelty, the endless obstacles, felt unbearable. It was then that Sam reappeared, weaker but alive. Our reunion was quiet, but it held all the power of a storm. Seeing him again ignited a fierce love and determination inside me. I realized that our fight was far from over, but together, we could face whatever came next. The complications continued to build. Sam's health declined, forcing me to make difficult decisions about care and support. I battled with the city's bureaucracy, pushing for access to services and shelter. Meanwhile, my own life was unraveling. The pressure from my family reached a breaking point. They gave me an ultimatum: choose between them and Sam. It was the hardest moment of all. I had to decide what kind of person I wanted to be, and what love truly meant. Through tears and heartache, I chose love. That choice came with consequences. I left home, stepping into uncertainty, but refusing to abandon the man who had loved me like no one else. The complications tested every belief I held. But in the crucible of hardship, my convictions were forged stronger. By the end of this act, I was no longer a frightened girl hiding in the shadows. I was a young woman shaped by love, loss, and the fierce refusal to give up. The path ahead was still uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure: love would guide me through the darkest nights. The turning point came quietly, without the fanfare I had expected. It wasn't a grand revelation shouted from the rooftops, but a subtle shift in perspective that changed everything. After leaving home, I found myself in a small apartment near the community center. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a space where Sam and I could begin to rebuild. Living so close to the center brought new opportunities. I met people whose resilience amazed me: former addicts, veterans, mothers fighting for their children. Their stories were woven with pain and hope, much like Sam's. One evening, after a long day of volunteering and navigating the maze of social services, I sat with Sam in our cramped living room. He looked at me, eyes filled with a quiet strength I hadn't seen before. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. "You're not just surviving anymore. You're fighting." Those words hit me in a way nothing else had. For so long, I had seen myself as a girl trying to save someone else. But now I realized I was changing too. Our love had sparked a transformation inside me, a courage and determination I hadn't known I possessed. This revelation didn't erase the challenges. We still faced bills we couldn't pay, appointments we had to keep, and the constant shadow of uncertainty. But something had shifted in how I saw it all. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, I began to see each obstacle as a step towards something greater, a future where Sam could find stability, and I could claim my own place in the world. Around this time, I discovered a scholarship opportunity through a nonprofit focused on helping young adults in crisis. Applying felt like a leap of faith, but with Sam's encouragement, I poured my heart into the application. When the acceptance letter arrived, it felt like a lifeline. For the first time, I saw a path forward that included both education and the fight for justice. With new hope, I also started speaking out more, sharing our story with local groups, writing blog posts, and advocating for the homeless community. My voice, once timid and uncertain, grew stronger. Sam, too, began to change. The job at the shelter, though part-time and modest, gave him a sense of purpose and dignity. Slowly, the man I had fallen in love with emerged from the shadows of his past. The turning point was also about healing old wounds. We both had scars, his from years on the streets, mine from the isolation and fear that came with loving someone so vulnerable. But love, I realized, was not about fixing each other. It was about standing together in the face of pain, growing stronger through shared struggle. One afternoon, as we walked through the park where it had all begun, Sam took my hand. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together." Those words crystallized everything. The battle was far from over, but our love was a force that neither the city nor the past could erase. That moment marked a new beginning. The turning point had arrived, not as a sudden event, but as a steady, powerful shift in who we were and who we could become. The night air was crisp, carrying with it the scent of rain yet to fall. It was the kind of evening that felt heavy with expectation, an invisible tension wrapping around my chest like a vice. We were about to face the biggest challenge yet, and nothing could prepare me for what came next. Sam had been struggling with his health for months, a silent battle he tried to hide behind a brave smile. But the nights of coughing and weakness were growing more frequent. We had done everything we could, doctors, shelters, medication, but the system was broken, slow to act, and often indifferent. One evening, after a particularly harsh coughing fit, Sam collapsed. I was terrified, panic rising like a tidal wave. I called for an ambulance, and in those frantic moments, all the fears I had buried surfaced. The possibility of losing him, of being left alone in a world that had never truly cared. The hospital waiting room became the stage for the emotional climax of our story. Hours dragged by, each one marked by uncertainty and prayer. I sat clutching his hand, whispering promises of love and hope, afraid that this might be the last time. When the doctor finally came out, her face was solemn but kind. Sam's condition was serious, but with treatment, there was a chance. The news was a mixture of relief and dread, hope tangled with the fragility of life. That night, as I watched him sleep, I felt the weight of everything we had been through. His love had been a beacon in my darkest times, a steady light guiding me through fear and pain. But now, I understood the true depth of what he had given me, not just love, but strength. The emotional climax wasn't just about Sam's illness, it was about the transformation I had undergone. From a frightened girl who saw the world in black and white, I had become someone who understood the complexities of love, pain, and resilience. I realized that love was not perfect or easy. It was messy, sometimes painful, but always worth fighting for. In the days that followed, I stayed by Sam's side, holding him through the treatments and uncertainty. Our bond deepened, forged in the fires of shared struggle. At the same time, I used my growing voice to advocate for change. I spoke at community meetings, shared our story publicly, and pushed for better support for people like Sam. The city was still cold, but my heart was warm with purpose. One afternoon, as Sam rested, I read aloud from a letter I had written him, words I had kept hidden until now. It was a testament to our journey, a declaration of gratitude and love. "I may not have much," I whispered, "but what I have is you, and that is everything." In that moment, I saw the man who had been homeless, but loved me like no one else. Strong, vulnerable, and endlessly human. The emotional climax was not an end, but a powerful affirmation of love's endurance. We had faced the darkest night together, and though the future was uncertain, we were ready. Our love had changed me forever. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the room where Sam and I sat quietly. The battle we had fought, the one that seemed endless and overwhelming, had shaped us into something new. The journey from despair to hope was etched in every line on his face and every beat of my heart. Sam was still recovering, and while the road ahead was long, there was a sense of peace that had settled over us. We had survived the storm together, and in that survival, found a strength neither of us had expected. Reflecting on everything, I understood that love was not just about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about showing up, day after day, even when the world turned its back. It was about believing in someone when no one else would. What I had learned at 18, the year that changed everything, was more than a lesson in love. It was a lesson in humanity. I thought back to the nights spent on cold benches, to the whispered promises, to the tears and the laughter. Every moment had been a thread in the tapestry of our lives, weaving a story of resilience and hope. Our relationship, once seen by others as unlikely or impossible, had become a beacon for many. I found myself speaking at schools, community centers, and events, sharing our story to challenge stereotypes about homelessness and love. People listened, they asked questions, and slowly, attitudes began to shift. For me, the transformation was profound. I went on to finish school, supported by scholarships and the love that had carried me through. I dreamed bigger, not just for myself, but for others like Sam. Sam found steady work, and with it, a renewed sense of purpose. He volunteered at shelters, sharing his story to inspire others. The man who had once been invisible now stood tall, a testament to the power of love and perseverance. We built a life together that was far from perfect, but it was real. It was ours. Looking back, I realized that the title of my story, "He Was Homeless but Loved Me Like No One Else," was not just about the circumstances. It was about the lessons he taught me, that love transcends status, that kindness can be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes, the people society overlooks have the most to give. What I learned at 18 changed everything. It changed how I saw the world, how I saw love, and how I saw myself. Our journey was a reminder that every person has a story worth hearing, and every heart is capable of extraordinary love. As I close this chapter, I carry with me a message of hope. That love can break through the darkest barriers, that compassion can heal the deepest wounds, and that sometimes, the greatest lessons come from the most unlikely teachers. And in that truth, I find peace.